Hello all, welcome to Xamarin Tech Talks. Hope everyone are doing good. So today we will see user interface elements in Xamarin Forms, and today's topic is about grid. So we'll talk more about how can we leverage the grid through code behind and through XAML. So first, what is a grid? So grid is a specific element which is used to arrange views. So views in the sense any element that we talk in the forms. So we are arranging views into rows and columns. So how can we deal with the grid in terms of rows and columns? So rows and columns can be set in the form of proportional way or in the form of absolute way. Proportional way is something which is dependent on my screen width, and absolute way is primarily dependent on your content size. So when we talk about grid, so we get a little bit confused with our old table, traditional table that we talk about. So basically grid is purely intended to display the content within my screen. So, and grid doesn't have the concept of row and column and cell formatting. So when we talk about grid and it's the way we use, so let's take one small example. If I just want to display all the images within my contact list, so if I just want to show that in a row and column format, then I can just go with a small grid where I can just display all the images. So here my image view will be the element within my individual cell. I'm sorry. And how the elements are arranged. So the elements are arranged based on the specific index. So every particular cell and has its own index. So that index will be derived based on your row and a column. So before starting with content, so we need to define how many number of columns that I need to have and how many number of rows that I need to have. So if we are dealing with dynamic data, but at least we know how many columns that it will have, or else if even the columns also are dynamic, at least we just get to know like what is the width of my screen. So at least based on that we can just go with a proportional way of converting all the values in terms of how the grid column should behave. Let's say my column, my screen size is 500, for example, screen width is 500, and if I say like proportionate, if I just want to divide that into 3, then I can just make it 170 or 160, 160, 160. So, or 150, 150, 150. It depends upon how I just want to display the data. And the same way it applies with rows. So here we define our columns and rows using column definitions and row definitions. So if I talk about columns, then we deal with width. So width of a column. And if I talk about row, we deal with height of my row. So that particular thing will be defined through column definitions and row definitions. So let's jump start with creating a small sample where we'll deal with two kinds of examples. One is through XAML and another one is through code behind. So let's start in creating a small application. We'll make it sample grid. So just give us a minute so that it adds all the necessary packages to my Xamarin Forms application. And here I'm not going with any kind of patterns, this plain simple Xamarin Forms application. So we got to have one base page created. So I'll just add a navigation bar, okay, for a cleaner look. So let's go to our XAML. So I'm just going to create a stack layout, and within that grid is the element that we are now talking about. So initially I just want to have 2 columns for this sample. So I'm going to create grid dot column, and as I said, like column we deal with width. So I'm just column definitions, and I just want to have 2 columns. So I'm defining the column definition width. So I want to have 2 columns which are primarily dependent on my screen width. So as we said, like the grid can be set to a auto layout or a proportional layout or an absolute layout. Auto layout is basically dependent on your content. Proportional layout is based on your screen width. Absolute is based on your how you want to display the data. So let's say I want to go with a proportional way. So then I'll say like 100% is my width. So I'll make it 50 star in the sense, okay, 50% of my screen would be 1 column. So I am using a unit type called as star. That is the proportional way of representation. So if I say like auto, then it is simply auto. And if I want to specify absolute, it's directly value. So my absolute value, fixed value. So I'm going with proportional way. So now we defined columns. I want to go with row definition. So in this sample I just want to have 5 rows. So grid dot row definitions. So row definition height. So here I want to go with absolute way. So I'm just specifying 100 as a fixed value. So as we discussed, like we are dealing with 5 rows. So I'm just specifying 5 row definitions. And now we deal with the views within that particular cell. So for this sample, we'll use label and background color as a random color. And how can we determine, how can we specify that, okay, this particular column or this particular element belongs to this particular cell or this particular row and a column intersection? So how can I specify that? By using grid.row and grid.column. So the index starts from 0, the same way the index starts for row from 0. So if I don't specify any row or any column, then the default value will be 0. So, but here I am explicitly specifying that grid.row equals to 0 and grid.column equals to 0. And some properties for my label. Horizontal options equals to fill and expand. Vertical options equals to fill and expand. That's it. So as we are dealing with 5 rows and 2 columns, the elements will be 10. And we'll just change the colors. And for this particular first element, we specified it as 0, 0. And for the second one, 0, 1. And for the third one, it would be first row and column 1, first row and column 2, column 1 for the next one. The same way, row number 2, column number 0, row number 2, column number 1. Next would be row number 3, column number 0, row number 3, and the column number 1. Next would be row number 4 and the column number 0 and the row number 4, column number 1. So this is how we represent the grid row and grid column. So now let's run the application and see how it actually displays. So you see that I got 2 columns and 5 rows with random color, and the complete view is means grid is divided into two parts with equal proportionate for individual cell. And if I rotate, if you see, if I rotate, it automatically adjusts according to my screen width, because we are going with proportional way. So we said like 50%, 50%, and automatically it accommodates the complete view in such a way that it will be displayed 50%. As we compared this particular grid with the tables, so in our tables we have a concept called as column span and row span. So what is a column span and row span? So I think everyone know about what is a column span and row span. So I will just reiterate what is that. So if I just want to combine two rows or a specific number of rows, then we just use row span. And if I just want to combine multiple columns, then we deal with column span. So in here, I just want to span two columns of one particular row. So how can we do that? So I'll just take the first column in the sense my second row. So I'm just dealing with column span. Grid dot column span. And how many number of columns? As we have only two, so we'll be defining 2. And we can just remove the other cell element. So you can see my first row means row 1 index. This is 0 index and this is 1 index. My row number 2 is my two columns are combined into one single column. And if we rotate that, it automatically adjusts according to that. So that is the beauty of proportional way. So this is how we can just create my grid through XAML. So now we'll see a sample which actually does create a grid through code behind. So I'm just going to add a new XAML file. Let's name it as my page, and we'll just change the starting page as my page. And we'll create some user interface elements here. For saving the time, I'll just copy that. Okay, so here we have created a stack layout, and we are dealing with scroll view, just to scroll the content of the complete grid. Okay, scroll view is also one more user interface element which is used to scroll your content either horizontally or vertically or both. So you can just have a scroll view to just scroll the content from top to bottom or bottom to top or left to right or right to left. So this can be used to display the data in a continuous fashion. So I have just created a stack layout with specific properties, vertical options, and I just named my scroll view as my scroll view, and I have specified vertical options as fill and expand. Let's go to my page xaml.cs. I'm just going to create one object for grid. So my grid. So this is my grid property, and let's copy this, and we'll see what actually it has. So in the previous example, the same way we are going to create two columns, and the way we actually specified the proportional way is using star. Star is used to represent proportional way. But in XAML, we have specified it as 50 star, but we cannot specify that star text in XAML.cs. So the way that we represent is the complete value is treated as 1. So if I just want to split that particular thing in a proportional way, then I need to go with a factors. So here we are just dealing with 0.5, means 50%. And the unit type that we are specifying it as star. So it is 50%. So as we are dealing with two columns, then it would be 50-50%, which combines to 100% as one single element. And here I want to have 10 rows. So I just created a row index in my for loop, and I specified the maximum value as 10. And in the previous example, we have just gone with absolute value for the row. The same way we are dealing with absolute value here, and I'm specifying 100. And we are going with the column index. So as we have only two columns, so we are just defining the maximum value as 1, means less than 2. And we created a user interface element with the help of a label, and within that label I'm just trying to have a random background color and some external properties that I have specified to represent the data properly. And in this sample, we just see the data in such a way that every particular cell displays a column index and a row index. And we are using my grid is the grid that we have created .children.add. Children.add in the sense every particular user interface element may or may not have a children. The sub elements within that particular parent element are called as children. So in this sample, we see a stack layout and a scroll view. So the scroll view will be the children for my parent stack layout. And now we are dealing with a lot of cells. So cells and rows. So every particular user interface element within that particular cell will be the children for that grid. So this is how the hierarchy actually works. So I am specifying my grid.children.add and the user interface element. And if you see here, we have two other parameters, which says like left and top. Left indicates the column index, top indicates the row index. So, and we are passing column index and row index. And now we are displaying the complete grid in a parent scroll view that we have actually created here. So I'm just going to map the grid to the scroll view content. So now my grid has cells as the children, and my grid is the children for my scroll view, and my scroll view is the children for my stack layout. So this is the complete hierarchy. Now let's call the method in onAppear. So create grid, and let's run this. So you can see the random color on the scroll, and if you see here, we just got our column index and the row index. So row 0, column 0, row 0, column 1, row 1, column 0, row 1, column 1. So this is how we are trying to display the data. Let's see by rotating the device. So the same way how we have seen the same look and feel or the appearance of splitting a column across the orientations based on the proportional way. And so if we talk about multiple other parameters or properties within my grid, so based on my design, if I just want to have spacing between my cell, some spacing between my rows, then we can just go with column spacing and the row spacing. So based on that, you can just define the how it should actually display. And I can just have individual element level properties also. If I just want to have padding for my label and the other label doesn't want to have any padding, then I can just specify for that element itself. So it depends upon how the functionality you just want to show and how the design is being given. So this is how you can just manipulate grid through XAML and through the code behind. So thank you so much, and if you have any queries, you can just post a comment. So if you like the video, just give a thumbs up, and please do subscribe for my channel for updated videos. Thank you so much.